Her water broke on the cobblestones of Bergen's old quarter, raindrops mixing with tears as her husband's Bentley disappeared into the storm. But what happened next would cost him everything he thought money could buy. You sure don't want to miss out on this, trust me. The autumn rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Haugen mansion, each droplet like a tiny fist demanding entry into the marble and gold sanctuary that Magnus Haugen had built with oil money and ruthless ambition. Inside, the silence was more deafening than the storm. Astrid Haugen stood in the kitchen of their Floyen hillside estate, her 8-month belly pressing against the Italian marble countertop as she prepared Magnus' evening meal. Her blonde hair, once lustrous, hung limp around her shoulders, a casualty of months spent walking on eggshells around her husband's increasingly volatile moods. The salmon is overcooked, Magnus' voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his 6 feet 2 inches frame filling the space, silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. At 45, he commanded rooms the way he commanded board meetings, with calculated intimidation. Astrid's hand instinctively moved to her belly, feeling their son kick as if sensing the tension. I'm sorry, Kjer. The timer. Don't. His pale blue eyes, once charming enough to win her heart 7 years ago, now held nothing but cold assessment. I've told you about excuses, Astrid. They're the language of failure. She nodded, throat tight, and began preparing a fresh piece of salmon. The baby kicked harder, and she winced, gripping the counter. Magnus noticed. He noticed everything that could be construed as weakness, but offered no comfort. Dr. Eriksson called, she said softly, focusing on the pan. The baby's positioned well for delivery. He thinks maybe 2 more weeks. I can't think about that right now. Magnus' phone buzzed, and he immediately shifted his attention to it, thumb scrolling through what were undoubtedly emails from his oil trading empire. The Stavanger deal is consuming everything. I need focus, not distractions. Distractions. The word hit Astrid like a physical blow. Their unborn child, a distraction. Her, a distraction. What do you think drives someone to view their own family as distractions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Welcome back, my incredible viewers. Your comments from the last video have been absolutely overwhelming. I can see how deeply you're all connecting with the story, and the theories you've been sharing are absolutely brilliant. Some of you are surprisingly close to the truth of what's coming next. But before we continue, don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. We're building an amazing community here, and I don't want you to miss out on what's coming. And please, share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who would love this type of content. The more people we can bring into this community, the better it gets for everyone. Your engagement in the comments has been incredible, and I love reading every single one of your thoughts and theories. Keep them coming. Now, let's go in-depth into the story. The kitchen fell silent except for the sizzling salmon and the relentless rain. Astrid remembered their early days, how Magnus would hold her close during storms, whispering that she was his shelter. Now she was merely another possession in his collection, valuable only when she performed her role perfectly. I need to go out tonight, Magnus announced without looking up from his phone. Johan's having people over to discuss the North Sea acquisition. But the doctor said I shouldn't be alone, especially with the weather. Magnus finally looked up, and Astrid immediately regretted speaking. His expression had shifted to that particular blend of annoyance and condescension that had become his default with her. Astrid. His voice carried the same tone he used with incompetent employees. You're an adult woman, not a child. You've been pregnant before. I miscarried before, she whispered, the words barely audible over the storm. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Magnus' jaw tightened, not with sympathy, but with irritation at being reminded of their shared tragedy 2 years ago. That won't happen again, he said curtly, as if his authority could command biology itself. You're being dramatic. It's unattractive. Astrid turned back to the stove, blinking hard against tears that seemed to come too easily these days. The rain outside seemed to echo the chaos in her chest, wild, relentless, unstoppable. Magnus moved closer, and for a moment, she thought he might soften, might remember the man who had once traced her spine with gentle fingers and promised her the world. Instead, he straightened his tie in the reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator. I'll be late. Don't wait up. Magnus, please. The words escaped before she could stop them. I miss talking to you. Really talking. Like we used to. He paused at the threshold, his back to her. For a heartbeat, Astrid thought she saw his shoulders soften. But when he turned, his eyes held nothing but cold calculation. What we used to have was before I understood what building an empire required, he said. Sentiment is a luxury I can't afford right now. Neither can you. And then he was gone, leaving only the scent of expensive cologne and the echo of his handmade Italian shoes on marble floors. Astrid stood alone in the cavernous kitchen, her reflection multiplied in the polished surfaces around her, a pregnant woman in a golden cage, surrounded by wealth but starving for warmth. Outside, Bergen's lights twinkled through the rain like fallen stars, and she wondered when she had become a stranger in her own life. The salmon burned while she cried, filling the mansion with smoke that the ventilation system whisked away as efficiently as it handled all other imperfections in Magnus Haugen's carefully curated world. Bergen city center, same evening. The argument started, as most of their arguments did these days, over something trivial. Magnus had returned from Johann's gathering earlier than expected, finding Astrid asleep on the living room sofa, her swollen feet elevated on silk cushions, a half-eaten bowl of ice cream melting on the coffee table beside her. The sight of her, rumpled, vulnerable, human, seemed to ignite something dark in him. This is how you spend your evening. His voice cut through her drowsy peace like a scythe. While I'm securing our future, you're, what? Wallowing. Astrid startled awake, her hand immediately going to her belly as the baby responded to her sudden movement with a sharp kick. I was just resting. Dr. Eriksson said. Dr. Eriksson, Magnus mocked, loosening his tie with sharp, angry movements. All you do anymore is hide behind medical excuses. My grandmother worked the fish markets until the day she gave birth to my father. Norwegian women used to have backbone. The cruelty in his voice made her physically recoil. Magnus, please. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm just tired. Tired. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what's tiring, Astrid? Carrying this entire household. This entire marriage. Do you know what Johann asked me tonight? He asked if I was happy. Astrid struggled to sit up, her center of gravity awkward with the weight of their child. And what did you tell him? Magnus stared at her for a long moment, and in that silence, she heard her answer. Get your coat, he said suddenly. What? Your coat. We're going for a drive. You want to talk? Fine. We'll talk. Something in his tone made her stomach clench with more than pregnancy discomfort. Magnus, it's almost midnight. The roads are. Now, Astrid. The drive into Bergen city center was silent except for the rhythmic thrum of windshield wipers fighting the relentless October rain. Magnus navigated the winding roads with the same cold precision he brought to everything else, while Astrid gripped the door handle, each turn making her more nauseous. Where are we going? She asked as they descended toward the old quarter of Bergen, where medieval buildings huddled together like conspirators against the storm. You'll see. He parked the Bentley on a narrow cobblestone street near Vagen Harbor, where the rain turned the ancient stones into a treacherous mirror reflecting the streetlights. Through the windshield, Astrid could see the old wooden buildings of Bergen, their colorful facades muted by the storm into watercolor smears. Magnus, what are we doing here? He turned to her, and in the dim light of the car, his face looked like a stranger's, all sharp angles and cold calculation. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About missing how we used to talk. Yes, she said hopefully, reaching for his hand. He pulled away. The problem, Astrid, is that you seem to think our relationship is still some romantic fairy tale. That you can still make demands. Have expectations. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to her spiking heart rate. I don't understand. You've forgotten your place, Magnus continued, his voice growing colder with each word. You live in a house I paid for, wear clothes I bought, eat food I provide. Even the child you're carrying exists because I chose to start a family. Everything in your life, everything, flows from my generosity. Astrid felt something crack inside her chest. Generosity? Magnus, I'm your wife. This is our child. No. His voice cut like a blade. This is my child. You're simply the vessel I chose to carry him. And lately, you've been a disappointing vessel at that." The words hit her like physical blows. She stared at him in the dim light, searching for any trace of the man she'd married, the man who'd once held her during thunderstorms and whispered promises against her hair. "I think," Magnus said, reaching across her to open her door, "you need to remember what life looks like without my protection." Cold rain immediately began pelting into the car, soaking her nightgown and the thin cardigan she'd thrown over it. "Magnus, what are you doing?" "Teaching you a lesson." His voice was eerily calm. "Get out." "What?" "No." "Magnus, I'm 8 months pregnant, it's pouring." "Get out." Have you ever witnessed someone's true character emerge during a crisis? What do you think shapes a person into someone capable of such cruelty? Tell us in the comments. When she didn't move, paralyzed by shock and disbelief, Magnus walked around to her side of the car. The rain immediately soaked through his expensive suit, but he seemed not to notice. He pulled her door wider, his face a mask of cold determination. "Step out of the car, Astrid." "Please," she whispered, rain already soaking through her thin nightgown. "Please don't do this. Think of the baby." "I am thinking of the baby. I'm thinking about what kind of mother he deserves. One who understands respect. One who knows her place." Her legs shook as she struggled to stand on the slick cobblestones, her swollen belly making balance precarious. The rain was brutal, fat, cold drops that seemed to find every inch of exposed skin. Within seconds, her hair was plastered to her head, her nightgown clinging to her pregnant form. "Magnus, please," she reached for him, desperation making her voice crack. He stepped back, avoiding her touch like she was something contaminated. "Walk home, Astrid. Think about what I've said. Think about gratitude. About respect. About knowing your place in my world." "It's 15 kilometers," she cried, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I can't, the baby." But Magnus was already back in the car, the engine purring to life. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see his silhouette, straight and unmoved, as he put the Bentley in reverse. "Magnus." She stumbled after the car, her bare feet slipping on the wet stones. "Please. Don't leave me here." The red taillights disappeared into the storm, leaving her alone in the medieval quarter of Bergen, 8 months pregnant and soaked to the bone, surrounded by buildings that had stood for centuries and witnessed countless human cruelties, but perhaps none quite like this. Astrid stood there for several minutes, water streaming down her face, rain and tears indistinguishable now. Her nightgown clung to her like a second skin, offering no warmth against the October cold. The baby seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly inside her, each kick a reminder of how vulnerable they both were. She wrapped her arms around her belly and began to walk, her bare feet already numb against the cobblestones. Each step was treacherous on the slick surface, and she had to stop frequently to catch her breath, pressing herself against ancient walls for support. After only 2 blocks, the first contraction hit. It started as a tightening across her lower back, spreading around to her belly like a band of steel. She doubled over, gasping, one hand pressed against a medieval stone wall that had stood there since before Norway was even a unified kingdom. "No," she whispered to herself, to the baby, to the storm. "Not now. Please, not now." But as she straightened and tried to continue walking, she felt it, a warm trickle down her legs that wasn't rain. Her water had broken. Standing alone in the ancient quarter of Bergen, abandoned by the man who had promised to love and protect her, Astrid Haugen realized that her husband's cruel lesson was about to become something neither of them had expected. The storm raged on, but now it seemed less like nature's fury and more like the world itself crying out in outrage at what had been done to her. Bergen Old Quarter, same night. The second contraction came faster than the first, dropping Astrid to her knees on the rain-slicked cobblestones. She pressed her palms against the rough stone, gasping as the pain wrapped around her middle like a vice. The medieval buildings loomed over her, their centuries-old walls silent witnesses to her desperation. "Help," she whispered to the empty street, then louder, "Help me." Her voice was swallowed by the storm, but as the contraction faded, she heard something else. Footsteps, quick and purposeful, splashing through puddles. "Herregud. Miss, are you all right?" The voice was young, female, speaking Norwegian with a slight accent. Astrid looked up through the rain to see a figure approaching, a young woman in a bright yellow raincoat, carrying a large umbrella. As she drew closer, Astrid could make out kind brown eyes and dark skin, rain droplets catching in her tightly coiled hair. I'm having a baby, Astrid managed between gasps. Here? Now. The woman immediately knelt beside her, heedless of the puddles soaking through her jeans. I'm Amara. I'm a nursing student at Bergen University. Let me help you. Amara, Astrid repeated, the name feeling like a lifeline. I'm Astrid. My water broke, my husband, he left me here. Amara's eyes flashed with something fierce. He left you? In this storm? While you're in labor? Another contraction built, and Amara immediately moved to support her. Breathe with me, Astrid. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. As the pain ebbed, Amara pulled out her phone. I'm calling an ambulance, but in this weather, to this location. She shook her head. We need to get you somewhere warm and dry. Can you walk a little? I think so, Astrid whispered, though her legs felt like water. My apartment is just around the corner, Amara said, helping her to her feet. It's not much, but it's warm, and I have medical supplies for my studies. They moved slowly through the narrow streets, Amara's arm supporting Astrid while the umbrella provided some shelter from the relentless rain. With each step, Astrid marveled at this stranger's kindness, something her own husband had refused to show. Amara's apartment was a tiny studio in a converted medieval building, but it was everything Magnus' mansion wasn't: warm, welcoming, filled with life. Medical textbooks were stacked on a small table, and photos of smiling family members covered one wall. A pot of something that smelled like cardamom and cinnamon simmered on a small stove. Sit here, Amara said, guiding Astrid to a small couch covered with a colorful throw. Let me get you dry clothes and call for help. As Amara bustled around the apartment, finding towels, calling emergency services, preparing supplies, Astrid felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine care from another human being. The ambulance is delayed, Amara said, returning with a warm cup of tea. There's been an accident on the highway, and with this storm, they say it could be an hour or more. An hour. Astrid's voice rose in panic as another contraction began building. Hey, look at me, Amara said firmly, taking her hands. I've delivered 3 babies during my clinical rotations. If we need to do this here, we can. You're not alone anymore. Meanwhile, across the city, Magnus sat in his study, a tumbler of 20-year-old whiskey in his hand, staring out at the storm. He'd changed into dry clothes and settled into his leather chair, expecting to feel satisfied with his lesson. Instead, an uncomfortable knot had formed in his stomach. She would call eventually. Beg him to come get her. Learn her place. But his phone remained silent. He poured another whiskey, telling himself he felt nothing but righteous satisfaction. Astrid needed to understand the reality of their arrangement. He was the provider, the decision-maker, the one with power. She was, what had he called her? A vessel. The word tasted sour in his mouth now. His phone buzzed. Finally. But it wasn't Astrid, it was Johan. Magnus, you need to see the news. Johan's voice was tight with concern. What news? Turn on TV 2 Norge. Now. Magnus grabbed the remote, his hands suddenly unsteady. The screen flickered to life, showing a weather report about the storm, but then shifted to breaking news. Pregnant woman found in labor in Bergen's old quarter during the storm. The woman, who appears to have been abandoned without proper clothing or shelter, was rescued by a local nursing student. The blood drained from Magnus' face as shaky cell phone footage filled the screen. Astrid, soaked and clearly in distress, being helped by a young woman in a yellow raincoat. The footage was grainy, but her face was unmistakably visible. Police are investigating how a woman in such an advanced stage of pregnancy came to be alone in the storm. The Good Samaritan who found her has been praised for her quick thinking and compassion. Magnus' phone began ringing. First one call, then another, then another. Board members, business partners, friends, all seeing the same footage. Magnus. Johan's voice came through the phone he'd forgotten he was holding. Magnus, is that? I have to go, Magnus whispered, ending the call. He stumbled to his feet, the whiskey forgotten. On screen, the news anchor was talking about the importance of community support and the dangers of domestic situations that leave vulnerable people at risk. Back at Amara's apartment. You're doing beautifully, Amara said, supporting Astrid through another contraction. They'd been coming steadily now, 5 minutes apart. "Tell me about your baby. What are you hoping for?" "I just want him to be safe," Astrid gasped. "To be loved. To never doubt that he's wanted." Amara's hand stilled on her back. "Him. The ultrasound. We're having a son." Tears mixed with sweat on Astrid's face. "I was so happy when we found out. I thought Magnus would be different once the baby came. Better. Like he used to be." "And tonight? When he left you?" Astrid closed her eyes, the pain of that abandonment somehow worse than the physical contractions. "He said I needed to learn my place. That I was just a vessel for his child." Amara's jaw tightened. "You are not a vessel. You are a woman about to bring life into this world. You are brave and strong, and any man who can't see that is a fool. What do you think makes someone capable of such kindness to a stranger? Share your thoughts about the people who've been unexpected angels in your life." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small apartment, something beautiful was happening. Two women, one abandoned by wealth and privilege, one rich in compassion and courage, were bringing a new life into the world together. "Amara," Astrid said between contractions, "why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Amara paused in her preparations, meeting Astrid's eyes. "My mother always said that we're all just walking each other home. Tonight, I'm walking you home to motherhood. Tomorrow, maybe someone walks me home when I need it." As if summoned by their conversation, Astrid's phone buzzed. Magnus. She stared at the screen, his name appearing and disappearing as the call went to voicemail. Then again. And again. "He's seen the news," Astrid whispered. "Do you want to answer?" Astrid looked around Amara's humble apartment, at the medical books that represented dreams and hard work, at the photos of family who clearly loved each other, at this stranger who had shown her more kindness in 2 hours than her husband had in months. "No," she said firmly. "Right now, there's only one person I need to focus on." As if responding to his mother's words, the baby kicked hard, and Astrid felt the unstoppable urge to push. "Amara," she gasped. I think it's time." "Then let's meet your son," Amara said with a smile. "Let's bring him home." Outside, Magnus Bentley pulled up to the medieval quarter, its headlights cutting through the storm as he desperately searched the empty streets for the wife he'd abandoned. But she was no longer there, no longer waiting for his rescue. She was being reborn herself, in the warmth of human kindness he'd forgotten how to give. At Amara's apartment and the streets of Bergen, 2:30 a.m. "I can see his head." Amara's voice was steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Astrid, you're incredible. One more push." The pain was unlike anything Astrid had ever experienced, but it was a different kind of pain than her husband's cruelty. This was pain with purpose, pain that brought life rather than destroying it. She gripped Amara's hands and pushed with every ounce of strength she had left. And then, a cry. High, indignant, and absolutely perfect. "He's here," Amara whispered, tears streaming down her face as she lifted the tiny squalling baby. "Your son is here, and he's beautiful." Astrid sobbed as Amara placed the baby on her chest, his tiny fists waving as if he was protesting the world he'd just entered. But as soon as he heard his mother's voice, he quieted, his unfocused eyes seeming to search for her face. "Hello, my love," Astrid whispered, her voice thick with wonder. "Hello, my brave boy. You couldn't wait, could you? What will you call him?" Amara asked, efficiently cleaning up while keeping watch over her patients. Astrid looked down at her son. So small, so perfect, so completely hers. "Eric. Eric Magnus Haugen." She paused, then added softly, "Though maybe he deserves a better last name." Before Amara could respond, there was a thunderous pounding on the apartment door. "Astrid." Magnus' voice, hoarse and desperate, echoed through the building. "Astrid, I know you're in there." The baby startled at the shouting, and Astrid instinctively pulled him closer. "How did he find me?" Amara's expression hardened. The news footage showed this street. He probably went door to door. She stood, placing herself between Astrid and the door. "You don't have to see him. Not now. Not ever if you don't want to. Astrid, please." Magnus' fists hammered against the door. "The whole city is watching. Do you know what you've done to me? To us. Listen to him, Amara said quietly. Even now, it's about what this has done to him. The pounding intensified, and other voices joined Magnus, reporters who had followed him, neighbors disturbed by the commotion. Through the thin walls they could hear fragments. Abandoned his pregnant wife, left her in the storm. What kind of man? I have to face him eventually, Astrid said, though her arms tightened protectively around Eric. He's the baby's father. Being a father is more than biology, Amara replied firmly. Are you sure you're ready for this? You just gave birth 20 minutes ago. Before Astrid could answer, Magnus' voice changed, became the smooth public persona he wore for business deals and social functions. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, he said, clearly addressing the growing crowd outside. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. My wife, she's been suffering from prenatal depression. She wandered out in the storm, and I've been frantically searching for her all night. Liar. The word exploded from Astrid with such force that both Amara and baby Eric startled. I won't let him do this. I won't let him rewrite what happened. She struggled to sit up, still holding Eric close. Help me to the window. Astrid, you need to rest. Help me. Amara supported her as she moved to the small window overlooking the street. Below, Magnus stood in the rain, surrounded by reporters and camera crews. Even soaked and disheveled, he commanded attention, spinning his web of lies with practiced ease. Been worried sick about her mental state. The pregnancy has been difficult, and she's not been thinking clearly. I'm just grateful this kind student found her before. Magnus Haugen. Astrid's voice cut through the storm like a blade. Everyone looked up. Magnus' face went white as he saw her in the window, holding their newborn son, very much lucid and very much angry. Tell them the truth, Magnus, she called down, her voice carrying clearly in the rain-washed air. Tell them how you dragged me from our home, drove me to the old quarter, and left me in the storm to teach me a lesson. Tell them how you called me a vessel. Tell them what you really think of your wife and son. The reporters' heads swiveled back to Magnus like spectators at a tennis match. Cameras focused on his face as the color drained from it completely. Astrid, you're confused. The trauma of childbirth. I gave birth on a stranger's floor because my husband abandoned me. Her voice cracked with emotion, but it carried the unmistakable ring of truth. This woman, Amara, showed me more kindness in one night than you've shown me in years. One of the reporters, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, stepped closer to Magnus. Mr. Haugen, these are serious allegations. Can you explain why your wife was found alone, in labor, without proper clothing or shelter? Magnus' mouth opened and closed like a fish. His practiced charm, so effective in boardrooms and social gatherings, crumbled under the weight of his own actions. You have to understand the pressure I've been under. The Stavanger deal, the company. So you left your pregnant wife in a storm? Another reporter pressed. It wasn't supposed to. She was supposed to call. Magnus' voice trailed off as he realized how his words sounded. Have you ever seen someone's public mask slip away to reveal who they really are? What do you think drives people to finally speak their truth? Share your thoughts below. From the window, Astrid watched her husband, the man she'd once loved, once trusted, once believed in, crumble under the spotlight of his own cruelty. But instead of satisfaction, she felt something unexpected: pity. Amara, she said quietly, could you help me downstairs? Not to go to him, she added quickly. But I think I need to say something. For me. For Eric. For every woman who's ever been called a vessel instead of a person. Amara nodded, understanding. Are you sure you're strong enough? Astrid looked down at her son, who was gazing up at her with unfocused but trusting eyes. I'm stronger than I've ever been. Minutes later, supported by Amara and wrapped in a warm robe, Astrid emerged from the building. The crowd parted respectfully, and even the hardened reporters fell silent as they saw her, a woman who had just given birth, holding her newborn son, facing down the man who had betrayed them both. Magnus started toward her, but she held up a hand that stopped him in his tracks. 7 years ago, she said, her voice steady despite everything she'd been through, I married a man who promised to love and protect me. Tonight, that man left me and his unborn child in a storm because I dared to want basic human decency. She looked directly at Magnus, and he flinched as if she'd struck him. "You called me a vessel, Magnus. Said I'd forgotten my place. But you're wrong. I know exactly what my place is." She lifted her chin, rain mixing with tears on her face, but her voice never wavering. "My place is as a mother who will teach her son that real strength comes from kindness, not cruelty. My place is as a woman who refuses to be diminished by a man's need to feel powerful. My place is standing here, having survived your worst, and still being the person who chooses to build rather than destroy." The crowd was silent except for the rain and the soft whir of cameras. Magnus stood frozen, his expensive suit ruined, his carefully constructed image in tatters. "I hope someday you remember who you used to be," Astrid continued, her voice gentling with genuine sadness. "But until then, Eric and I will be just fine without you." She turned to go back inside, but Magnus' voice stopped her. "Astrid, wait. Please." For the first time all night, his voice held no manipulation, no calculation, just raw, desperate honesty. I don't know what happened to me. What I became." She turned back to face him, and in his eyes, she saw not the cold stranger who had abandoned her, but a glimpse of the broken man underneath. "I know what happened, Magnus," she said quietly. "You forgot that love isn't something you can own or control. It's something you nurture, something you protect, something you choose every day." She looked down at Eric, then back at her husband. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" Bergen, 6 months later. The morning light filtering through the windows of Astrid's new apartment carried none of the sterile coldness of the mansion she'd left behind. This light was warm, gentle, painting everything in soft golds as 6-month-old Eric gurgled happily in his high chair, his chubby fists wrapped around pieces of soft fruit. "Good morning, my love," Astrid murmured, kissing his forehead as she prepared his bottle. Eric had grown into a remarkably content baby, quick to smile, slow to fuss, as if he somehow understood that he'd been born into a world of hard-won peace. The apartment in Bergen's Sandviken district was small compared to the mansion, but it was theirs, purchased with her portion of the divorce settlement that Magnus hadn't contested. Every corner reflected choices she'd made freely, books she wanted to read, plants that thrived in the morning light, photos of Eric's first months surrounded by people who truly loved them. A soft knock at the door made her look up. Through the frosted glass, she could see a familiar silhouette holding what looked like flowers. "Come in, Amara," she called. Her dearest friend entered with her characteristic warm smile, carrying a bouquet of early spring flowers and a small wrapped package. In the months since that stormy October night, Amara had become more than a friend. She was Eric's chosen aunt, Astrid's sister in all the ways that mattered. "Happy half-birthday, little man," Amara cooed, scooping Eric from his high chair. He immediately reached for her face, babbling in the serious way babies do when they have important things to say. "The flowers are beautiful," Astrid said, arranging them in a simple glass vase. "You spoil us." "Someone should," Amara replied, settling into the rocking chair with Eric. "Speaking of which, did you see the morning news?" Astrid's smile faltered slightly. "About Magnus." The foundation made another major donation. This time to support pregnant women in crisis. They're calling it the Second Chances Initiative. Astrid was quiet for a moment, watching her son play with Amara's necklace. In the months since their very public confrontation, Magnus had undergone what could only be described as a complete transformation. The man who had built an empire on ruthless ambition had turned that same intensity toward making amends. "He sent another letter," Astrid said finally. "I haven't opened it yet." They came every week, handwritten letters that Astrid received but rarely read. She knew from the few she had opened that they contained no demands, no manipulation. Just apologies, updates on his therapy, and quiet expressions of hope that someday she might let him meet his son. "Are you considering it?" Amara asked gently. Before Astrid could answer, there was another knock, this one more hesitant, uncertain. Through the glass, she could see a tall figure shifting nervously from foot to foot. Magnus. Astrid's breath caught. In 6 months, they'd communicated only through lawyers and those weekly letters. Seeing him here at her sanctuary sent her heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. "I can tell him to leave," Amara said quietly, protective instincts immediately activated. "No," Astrid said, surprising herself. "It's okay. Could you take Eric to his room while I—" Amara nodded, gathering the baby and his toys. We'll be right here if you need us. Astrid opened the door to find Magnus looking unlike any version of himself she'd ever seen. Gone was the perfectly styled hair, the expensive suits, the aura of untouchable confidence. This Magnus wore simple jeans and a wool sweater, his hair slightly mussed from the morning breeze. But it was his eyes that startled her most. They held a depth of genuine remorse she'd never seen before. "Hello, Astrid," he said quietly. "I hope it's okay that I came. I know I should have called, but you were afraid I wouldn't answer," she finished. He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I've been coming here for weeks. Walking past, trying to work up the courage. Today, I saw you through the window with Eric, and he looked so happy. So healthy. I needed to see for myself that you were both okay." Despite everything, Astrid felt a familiar tug of compassion. She stepped aside. "Would you like some coffee?" Magnus' eyes widened in surprise. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. But maybe I want to." They sat at her small kitchen table, the silence initially awkward but gradually settling into something more comfortable. Magnus' eyes kept drifting toward the hallway where they could hear Eric babbling to Amara. "He sounds happy," Magnus said softly. "He is. We both are. I'm glad." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "I read about your work with the women's shelter. That you're studying to become a counselor." Astrid nodded. "I realized that night, when Amara helped me, that I wanted to be that person for others. Someone who shows up when everything falls apart. What do you think it takes for someone to truly change? Have you ever witnessed a genuine transformation in someone you thought was beyond redemption? Share your experiences below." Magnus was quiet for a long moment. "I've been seeing Dr. Lindstrom, a therapist, 3 times a week for 6 months." "I know. You mentioned it in your letters. Do you read them?" "Sometimes." Astrid met his eyes. "The ones where you don't ask for anything. Where you just talk. About who you used to be. About who you want to become." "I remember everything about that night," Magnus said suddenly. "Every word I said. Every look on your face. The way you tried to reach for me and I stepped away." His voice cracked. "I remember driving home and feeling satisfied. Like I'd won something." Astrid's coffee cup rattled slightly as she set it down. "Magnus. No, please. Let me say this. I need to say this." He looked directly at her, and she saw tears gathering in his eyes. "I became a monster, Astrid. I convinced myself that providing for you was the same as loving you. That controlling you was protecting you. That your needs, your feelings, your very humanity were somehow inconvenient to my plans." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so vulnerable and un-Magnus-like that it made her chest ache. "Dr. Lindstrom says I was terrified," he continued. "Terrified that if I wasn't perfect, if I wasn't completely in control, everything would fall apart. Like when I was a child and my father lost everything. So I built walls higher and higher until I couldn't see over them anymore. Couldn't see you. Couldn't see what I was destroying." From the bedroom came the sound of Eric's delighted laughter as Amara played peekaboo with him. Magnus' face crumpled at the sound. "I missed his first smile, didn't I? His first laugh." "Yes," Astrid said gently. "But Magnus, babies have lots of firsts. There's still time for some of them." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Do you mean?" "I mean that our son deserves the chance to know his father. The real one. Not the man who left us in the storm, but not the perfect facade either. The real, flawed, working on himself human being." Magnus was silent for a long moment. "What would that look like?" "It would look like you continuing therapy. It would look like supervised visits, at first. It would look like you proving consistently over time that you've truly changed. And us." His voice was barely a whisper. "Is there any possibility?" Astrid looked around her small, sunlit apartment, her sanctuary, her place of healing. "I don't know, Magnus. I honestly don't know. 6 months ago, you broke something in me that I'm still learning how to repair. But the fact that you're here, asking instead of demanding, suggests that maybe the man I married is still somewhere inside the stranger you became. As if summoned by their conversation, Amara appeared in the doorway holding Eric. The baby immediately focused on Magnus with the intense curiosity that babies have for new faces. "This is your papa, Lil Ven," Astrid said softly, taking Eric from Amara. "Would you like to meet him?" Magnus' hands shook as he reached out, then stopped. "May I?" "You may." The moment Magnus held his son for the first time was unlike anything Astrid had ever witnessed. This powerful man who had commanded boardrooms and built empires was undone completely by 6 months of pure trust looking up at him with curious blue eyes. "Hello, Eric," Magnus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your papa. And I promise you, I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life being worthy of that title." Eric, with the wisdom that babies sometimes seem to possess, reached up and grabbed his father's finger with a surprisingly strong grip. "He's perfect," Magnus breathed, looking up at Astrid with wonder. "Thank you. For keeping him safe. For bringing him into the world with love instead of—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "He was born into love," Astrid said firmly. "Born into a room full of people who wanted him, who celebrated him. That's the foundation he'll always have." They sat together in the morning light, not a family yet, but perhaps the beginning of one. Outside, Bergen was waking up to another day of possibilities. Inside, a man was meeting his son for the first time, while the woman he'd lost was cautiously opening her heart to the idea that people could change, that love could grow back even in the most wounded soil. "There's something else," Magnus said quietly, still marveling at Eric's tiny fingers wrapped around his. "The foundation. I want to name it after you. The Astrid Haugen Foundation for Women and Children in Crisis. If that would be okay." Astrid was quiet for a moment. "Not the Astrid Haugen Foundation," she said finally. "The Eric Foundation. Named for the boy who was born into kindness, surrounded by love, and who will grow up knowing that strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." Magnus nodded, understanding. "The Eric Foundation it is." As the morning sun climbed higher, painting everything in warm gold, 3 adults and 1 baby sat together in a small apartment in Bergen, writing the first tentative lines of a story about second chances, about the long road back from cruelty to kindness, and about the miraculous resilience of the human heart. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Those come too easily and teach us nothing about the real work of love. But it was something better, a beginning built on truth, accountability, and the radical hope that people can change if they're willing to do the hard work of becoming who they were meant to be. Outside, the storm clouds that had dominated Bergen's sky for months were finally breaking apart, letting the sunshine through. What do you think about second chances? Do you believe people can truly change, or are we forever defined by our worst moments? This story was about finding light in the darkest places. Share your thoughts about redemption, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to start over. Your comments inspire more stories like this one. I'm glad you followed Eric's journey from his dramatic entrance into the world to the beginning of his family's healing. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about perfect people making perfect choices, but about flawed humans finding their way back to each other and to themselves. Thanks for watching till the end. We know you loved this story, and there are many more thrilling ones waiting for you. Just click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter.